just when I look around the world, I don't really see democracies as really the best form of government. We always grew up just how great democracies are, and the democracies are the best thing in the world. And then, I lived for 10 years in Shanghai, and I really loved it there. I thought it was the country was run very well. I've traveled around. So, and then I'm just seeing, I'm just wondering, do democracies, are they broken now? Are they, is there an example where democracies are a great example form of governance? Like, what is the best form of governance in
Right.
this age? I just feel like we have this illusion of choice. And that's what democracy does. Is all the Western countries give you this illusion that, oh yeah, you guys are in charge. But at the end of the day, you always get the same thing. It's like choosing between Pepsi and Coke. And we all get really angry about which one we like. But at the end of the day, it's always the same. And things always seem to be slow. Democracies always seem to overpromise, overspend. They have very short-term thinking. Whereas when you have a system like, where in Singapore, where you had one guy that just said, all right, I'm going to take charge for 50 years and rock this. And he does. And just like how you have with somebody that's running a company, you don't want to have to change the new company leadership every couple of years. And all of a sudden everything's in chaos and you try to undo what the last guy did. And so it just seems like the systems we have now don't allow for long-term thinking, and it just causes all these problems with debt because we are able to overspend, and we have the printing press so we can do it. Whereas these other countries that people are always afraid, like, oh, China, it's just they are autocratic and they'll just throw you in jail if you look at them wrong. It's not true. Like, China obviously wants the best for its people, and it's setting long-term goals and plans for it. And like, I never really felt the pressure, or, Chinese friends that all of a sudden, like, yo, you can't speak about this or that. It was pretty open. You could, talk smack about the government. It wasn't a big deal. It's not like, but actually here, in a way, I almost feel like I'm censored more because there's all these things that are politically incorrect, or that you don't know what one person stands on. If this person loves Trump or this person thinks he's Hitler, you just can't really get into
you have
politics.
to watch your
But I
speech very
did
carefully. Yeah, no,
right, but I
had
never
the same
had that in
experience.
China.
And right, you could have very freewheeling discussions, and people could be highly critical of the government. I remember that. But it does need to be pointed out that there are some ways in which China is authoritarian and less tolerant of freedom than the U.S. is. And one is like, you can speak your mind in China. There's no question about that. And I think you're right. Actually, probably the Chinese are more outspoken and among themselves than Americans are, and probably many Westerners are at this point. But for example, it is much more difficult to, let's say, organize a demonstration against the government, or go on a march or whatever. Now, the thing is, we are seeing an erosion of that even within the West. Particularly in places like Germany and the UK, where there have been really vicious crackdowns. Somebody waved a Palestinian flag, and and the guy ends up in jail, or people, for expressing certain sentiments. I mean, or attempting to run some kind of platform, they get the knock on the door and they end up in jail. This happens in both the UK and Germany, and I'm sure in other European countries. So they're losing, they're certainly not stellar examples of the right to assembly or the right to protest or anything. But it's true. The Chinese the government's very strict about that. And, you can't create alternative organizations, or those are very highly restricted. That's the big difference, I think. But, I really don't know. Just looking down the road, I'm not all that confident that we will continue to have those rights in this country. We still do, but I think that over time, those rights are going to erode, just like the free speech rights are eroding now. But that's one thing. I guess I would say, just in general, about democracy versus other forms of government, is that every form of government can be corrupted. I think the important truth is that in fact every country does have a ruling elite. I mean, it's just the way societies form over time, and you can't really escape that fact. So in a way, you could say democracy is an illusion. The idea that the masses rule. At the best you can have, no matter what form of government you have, you want to have people at the top who actually have the best interests of the country at heart. And I think that, more or less we had that, decades ago in the West, that, people felt that's one reason, people were desperate to get to the West from places like the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact and communist China. Those were truly oppressive countries. We did have freedom, but, they were prosperous, well-run, orderly countries. But over time, our system of government, which did quite well back then, has been corrupted. And their systems of government, there's no longer a Soviet Union, but the Communist Party is still in charge, but it has undergone real reforms. It really has learned lessons from its mistakes, and it's really been very, very successful over the last few decades. So it's really, I think it comes down to, systems of government matter, but probably what matters most is the people that you have at the top. What kind of people, what kind of ethos they have. And at this time, the people that run the Western countries are really not devoted to the welfare of their own people. They're globalists that are, part of this hegemonic program, and they're committed to maintaining that hegemony. And it's to our detriment, that is to the peoples of the West, the various peoples of the West, but also, a real threat to global peace.